In November 2023, the New Zealand National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research's oceanographic research vessel, Niwa Tangaroa, completed an exploration expedition to the Tonga Trench, the world's second deepest ocean trench after the Mariana Trench, with a maximum depth of 10,882 meters known as the Horizon Hole. The expedition, jointly funded by the New Zealand government and the Tongan government's Deep Ocean Research Program, deployed a combination of autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, and a deep-sea remotely operated vehicle, ROV, to conduct the first systematic scan of a 200-kilometer section of the trench's central axis. The expedition's scientific objectives included geological mapping of the seafloor, characterizing biodiversity at various depths, and assessing the state of the sediments in relation to seismic activity in the area. However, among the campaign's findings was one that was not in any declared objective, and that the team's researchers described as potentially significant for the naval history of the Pacific. At a depth of 6,200 meters in a region of the trench that historical records did not associate with any known shipwreck, the autonomous vehicle's sonar detected the unmistakable silhouette of a large metal ship. Like, subscribe and share. Let's begin. The Tonga Trench is one of the most geologically dynamic environments on the planet. It forms at the convergent boundary between the Pacific and Australian plates, where the Pacific plate is subducting into the Earth's mantle at a rate of approximately 15 centimeters per year, the fastest known subduction rate at any plate boundary in the world. This rapid subduction generates extraordinarily intense seismic activity. The southwestern Pacific region around the islands of Tonga and Fiji experiences some of the most powerful earthquakes on the planet with a frequency greater than any other comparable region. The Tonga earthquake of January 2022, which reached a magnitude of 5.8 on the moment scale and preceded by just hours the catastrophic eruption of the underwater volcano Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai, reminded the world of the intensity of the geodynamic activity in this area. The trench itself is over 2,500 kilometers long and varies in width from 80 to 100 kilometers, stretching from the vicinity of New Zealand north to the Samoan Islands. Direct exploration is extremely limited due to the combination of extreme depths, frequent seismic activity, and the scarcity of resources available for deep-sea research in the Southwest Pacific. The ship detected by sonar at a depth of 6,200 meters measured approximately 150 meters in length according to the sonar scale, with a silhouette profile consistent with a cargo or transport ship from the first half of the 20th century. The wreck's position on the central axis of the trench, far from any known historical shipping routes, was the first puzzling element for the team. Southwest Pacific shipping routes during the period in which the ship was likely built passed mainly through the corridor between New Zealand, Fiji, the New Hebrides, and the Solomon Islands, areas of relatively shallow water on the continental and island shelves of the western Pacific. The Tonga Trench in the middle of the ocean was far from these routes and did not correspond to any documented commercial or military shipping itinerary. A search of shipwreck archives at Lloyd's Register in London, the National Archives of New Zealand, the Queensland State Archives in Australia, and the Pacific Shipwreck Repository maintained by the University of the South Pacific in Suva, Fiji, yielded no record of a vessel sunk at the approximate coordinates of the find or in the Tonga Trench region in general. The Pacific Historical Shipwreck Database is admittedly incomplete for the period before 1945. Particularly regarding non-English flagged vessels and sinkings that occurred without witnesses or survivors able to report the wreck's position. However, the absence of any record, combined with the wreck's location in an area of the ocean far removed from conventional shipping lanes, made the usual hypotheses of a shipwreck caused by a navigational accident or storm difficult to sustain. The expedition's deep-sea ROV conducted a preliminary visual inspection of the ship's exterior within 48 hours of its sonar detection. The images obtained showed a steel hull in a state of preservation that the team's engineers described as consistent with a submerged period of between 60 and 100 years. Steel corrosion at that depth and under the chemical conditions of the Tonga Trench, characterized by low temperature, low oxygen concentration, and high pressure, is significantly slower than in shallow waters, making it difficult to estimate the wreck's age solely from the metal's visual condition. The ship rested in a relatively stable position, listing about 20 degrees to starboard, on the clay sediment at the trench's axis. The external hull features observed by the ROV provided some data for the ship's provisional identification. The shape of the bow, with a curvature that the team's naval engineers identified as characteristic of cargo ships built in Europe or the United States between 1920 and 1950, was consistent with the period estimated by the metal corrosion. The position of the cargo cranes, of which at least 4 were visible in positions suggesting the ship carried general cargo, was also consistent with a commercial freighter of the period. However, one element did not fit the profile of an ordinary commercial freighter. In the ship's stern section, the ROV detected what appeared to be the remains of a deck installation that the engineers tentatively identified as an artillery platform, of the type used on armed merchant ships during World War II. Like, subscribe, and share. Armed merchant ships, known as armed merchant cruisers or simply Q-ships when used as decoys to lure enemy submarines, were an important element of naval warfare during both World Wars. During World War II, the British Royal Navy, the United States Navy, and other Allied navies armed thousands of merchant ships with cannons of varying calibers to provide some defensive capability against submarine and aircraft attacks. The presence of a gun platform on the ship in the Tonga Trench suggests that it could be one of these armed merchant ships, which would place its sinking most likely within the period of World War II and in the context of naval operations in the Southwest Pacific. The Southwest Pacific was the scene of intense naval activity during 1942 and 1943, when Japanese and Allied forces vied for control of the Solomon Islands, the New Hebrides, and the Coral Sea. Japanese submarines operated actively in these waters during this period, and several Allied merchant ships were sunk in the Southwest Pacific by Japanese torpedoes in circumstances that left no survivors or left survivors so far from any port that their testimonies, if any, never made it into official records. The possibility that the ship in the Tonga Trench was one of these vessels lost during the Pacific War, sunk in a position that no witnesses were able to record, was the strongest working hypothesis of the research team. NIWA researchers presented their findings to the New Zealand Naval Service and the Tongan Ministry of Defence, requesting a second expedition with more advanced equipment to definitively identify the ship. The remains of military and armed merchant ships sunk during World War II have the legal status of war graves in most legal systems worldwide, meaning that any intervention on the wreck requires authorization from the governments of the countries involved and must be carried out with the utmost respect for the memory of any possible victims. The follow-up expedition, planned for 2025, envisioned the deployment of a higher-capacity ROV equipped with high-resolution cameras capable of reading potential identification markings on the hull, and a metal scanner capable of determining the composition and origin of the hull alloys, which can indicate the ship's country of origin. The Tonga Trench, with its depth of over 10,000 meters at its deepest point, and its 2,500-kilometer stretch along the edge of the southwestern Pacific, is one of the least explored territories in the world's oceans. Each expedition that reaches its depths returns data that expands our understanding of the geology, biology, and now also the history of this region of the Pacific. The shipwreck found at 6,200 meters in the trench's central axis is a reminder that the deep ocean is also an archive of human history, and that in its most inaccessible places, data still awaits that will change our understanding of what happened in the Pacific Ocean during the years that transformed the world in the 20th century. The New Zealand National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, NIWA, is one of the leading scientific institutions in the Southwest Pacific for oceanographic research. Established in 1992 as a result of the restructuring of the New Zealand government's scientific research system, NIWA operates several research vessels and has active research programs in physical oceanography, marine biology, underwater geology, and atmospheric sciences. The Niwa Tangaroa, the vessel that conducted the 2023 expedition to the Tonga Trench, is a 70-meter-long multi-purpose research vessel with capabilities for deploying remotely operated and autonomous underwater vehicles, high-resolution multi-beam sonar systems, and a comprehensive suite of onboard scientific laboratories. New Zealand, as a country with an exclusive economic zone of more than 4 million square kilometers in the Southwest Pacific, has a direct strategic and scientific interest in researching the ocean depths surrounding its territory, and the discovery of the ship in the Tonga Trench adds a historical dimension to that interest, which the New Zealand government has recognized by prioritizing the follow-up expedition. The historical context of naval warfare in the Southwest Pacific during World War II surrounding the possible origin of the ship found in the Tonga Trench deserves closer examination. The Guadalcanal campaign, which unfolded between August 1942 and February 1943, was the first major Allied land offensive in the Pacific and required a massive logistical effort to supply Allied forces in the Solomon Islands via sea routes across the Southwest Pacific. Dozens of transport and general cargo ships sailed these routes under constant threat of Japanese air and submarine attacks, and several were sunk in positions that, in the chaos of wartime operations, were never accurately recorded. The direct route from the Australian ports of Brisbane and Townsville to the Solomons passed relatively close to the northern region of the Tonga Trench, and a ship that deviated from this route for any reason, whether pursued by a Japanese U-boat or trying to avoid a storm, could have ended up in waters directly above the trench's axis. The naval history of the Pacific has gaps that only the exploration of the seabed can fill. Like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.